No, I think Jenna had. I can't remember if Jenna. I don't think Jenna had gotten there before it. It's just so cloudy to me, like when people got there. But no, they did not talk to Addison that
Was
day.
she eventually forensically interviewed?
Yes.
Okay.
They took her cell phone.
Law enforcement.
Yes.
Okay. And that was a big deal.
That was a very big deal. She was very upset about it.
So she was eventually forensically interviewed, and you know that to mean what?
When, I mean, they flew down, this was over a year later. This was August of 2019, and Kendall Lee, their mother, my ex-wife, flew down with them, and we went to I think it was Ann Crawford Children's Center. My children went in the back and were interviewed, and we were not in there, myself or their mother. And then they came out, and that was it.
Okay. As far as you know, no law enforcement interviewed them.
No. The only thing I seem to remember was maybe law enforcement was listening to it, but there was no law enforcement there physically.
Okay. Did you talk to Manny Aurora about Addison being interviewed or spoken with?
Yeah.
What
He
was that?
confronted me about it, and he wanted me to call my daughter. This was not at the first meeting. This was we had multiple meetings with Manny Aurora. And he wanted me to call my daughter and put her on speakerphone for him and like everybody in that room to basically like confront my daughter.
Your Honor, I'm going to go ahead and object to relevance. I allowed kind of a brief reenactment of what happened earlier, but now we're continuing to talk about what a previous attorney in this case was saying, so I would go ahead and object to relevance, Judge.
It explains why he didn't go to law enforcement and eventually.
He can explain what he did next without going into the content, so I'll sustain the objection.
Did you eventually go to law enforcement yourself?
Yes,
Why did you do that?
because I'd had it. I was done with, I didn't like the way that was going with her attorneys. And so, and I was just wanted to know what happened, and I just felt compelled to help find out.
Did anyone go with you?
My brother, Scott.
Do you remember about how long after your father's remains were found did you go voluntarily with your brother to talk to law enforcement?
I don't remember the day. I don't remember the date.
Was it more than 10 days after?
I don't remember.
If
'Cause
I,
I went-
had told you it was July 26th, would that sound accurate to you?
It could. What I'm trying to think, because I went to Maine, and that meeting was either right before or right after it. So if it was July 26th, it would have been, I believe, right after I got back from Maine.
Okay. You went to Maine to see your daughters?
Yeah, I had to get out of this town.
So you sat down with what law enforcement officer or officers did you sit down with when you and Scott spoke with them?
For sure, Detective Hayes, and a couple other ones. I think Kuykendall might have been there, but I can't be sure. There were people coming in and out. It was a lengthy interview. Mm-hmm. It was officers coming in and out.
I want to talk about the year that followed your father's murder. So the next year, before your mother's arrest, You eventually, at some point, became the temporary administrator of his estate. Can you
Correct.
tell the jury about that?
Yeah. I mean, the farm was basically, there were financial problems. I mean, the farm was potentially going into foreclosure. I mean, there were things going on. My mother was openly trying to say we need to get the death certificate and like all these things. And Emily and Scott and I decided we needed to do something as far as, because they froze all my father's accounts. There was nobody who could use any of that money, and somebody had to do it. There were discussions back and forth whether Amanda was going to do it, and there was at this time a very hard divide in our family. And
What was that divide?
well,
Who was divided?
my brother Scott, my sister Emily, and I on one side, and my mother and Amanda on the other. My mother was not living, but still had kind of a relationship with Amanda.
What created the divide?
Well, a lot of things. I mean, it was my mother was very much so telling us that we needed to help support her, that we needed to give her money because my father had supported us and given us money all these years, and that we needed to, in turn, give her money. To speak of my situation, and I just had my suspicions that she had something to do with this.
So there was a divide in the family. You eventually became the temporary executor of the estate, administrator. And so when you were in this role, did you learn who the beneficiary was of all your dad's assets?
Yeah. I was actually visiting my kids in Maine, and Barry Bishop sent me an email saying that my mother was on the life insurance and the 401k.
Eventually, did someone else get appointed the administrator of the estate?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Was that a contentious area among the family when you were appointed?
Yes.
How so?
My mother was not happy about it.
How did you know that?
Well, the day that I was officially appointed, and she had learned about it, her and my brother got into a pretty bad, I guess, argument or something like that.
You weren't there.
I wasn't there.
Did you and her ever speak?
Yeah.
How did you speak with her?
I called her. It wasn't too long after that, because I was getting, not directly from my mother, but through Amanda, basically saying, you need to do this because they thought I had access to these accounts and I didn't. What happened was, when I was named, because there were bills, there was the mortgage, there was a condo in Tuscaloosa, Alabama that my dad owned, that I wanted to start making these current. I didn't want those things to be foreclosed on or go away, and so when I was named temporary administrator, I immediately set up a meeting with his personal banker, and she said, okay, come down here, we're gonna have a meeting. I get to the meeting, she meets you in the parking lot, she's like, Chris, our legal team said a temporary administrator is not enough for me to give you access to your father's funds to pay for anything. From what I remember, that was either not believed or just maybe they didn't know that. And I called my mother to tell her that I can't do anything. I don't have a checkbook, I don't have a card, I don't have access to money. I can't. I have nothing to be able to pay these bills.
When you became the administrator of the estate, what was your role? What was your duty, your job, your oath?
My duty was to preserve the estate.
So be conservative with, try to save as much as you could.
Yeah.
Is that what that means? So let's go back to the phone call with your mom you had mentioned. What was that?
I called her and I said, I can't. I said, Mama, I can't do anything. I can't. And I did. I said, just please tell me what happened. I was like, there's no way you know. Or excuse me, there's no way you don't know. If all this happened like they say, there's no way you don't know about it. And then she hung up with me, and I think that's the last time I've talked to my mother ever. I mean, that's the last conversation that I've had with my mother, period.
Did you ever confront your mom about any of her affairs?
I'm sure I did. After this all happened, there were at that point text group threads for the family. I would get very angry about some of the things that were being said, and I would throw it out there like, well, you know, are having this affair, you know, XOXO, which was some name for Rusty's name on her cell phone, and I would like text it to like just.
Did
out
you
of
ever
anger.
confront her face to face?
I don't remember that.
After everything that happened, you had already mentioned your PTSD therapy. When did you start doing that?
Well, I started doing that.
Judge, I would object to relevance as to PTSD therapy.